Air travel is often considered one of the safest modes of transportation. With meticulous procedures, experienced pilots, and advanced technology, incidents are rare. But sometimes, even the slightest mistakes can cascade into near-catastrophic events. What happened on a quiet day in Australia, involving an Emirates flight preparing for takeoff, serves as a chilling reminder of how close we can come to disaster. The day started like any other at Sydney Kingsford Smith Airport, one of Australia's busiest aviation hubs. Emirates flight EK407 was a long-haul journey bound for Dubai, carrying passengers from all walks of life, families returning home, business travelers, and tourists heading to explore the marvels of the Middle East. The Airbus A340-500, a marvel of engineering, stood at the gate. Its engines, capable of lifting hundreds of tons into the sky, were a testament to human ingenuity. But even the most sophisticated machines are at the mercy of human error. As passengers settled into their seats and flight attendants completed their pre-flight checks, the pilots in the cockpit were busy reviewing their final procedures. Every flight relies on precise calculations: weight, balance, fuel load, weather conditions, all of it meticulously planned to ensure a safe departure. But on this day, a simple oversight would set the stage for a terrifying sequence of events. As the pilots inputted the plane's weight into the flight management system, an error slipped through unnoticed. Instead of the plane's actual takeoff weight of over 362 tons, a significantly lower weight was entered. This critical number determines everything about a takeoff: the thrust needed, the speed required to lift off, and the distance necessary to clear the runway. Unaware of the mistake, the crew continued with their preparations. The plane began taxiing toward the runway, its four engines rumbling with power. Passengers looked out the windows, some snapping photos of the sprawling airport, blissfully unaware of the danger they were about to face. The aircraft lined up for departure, and the pilots pushed the throttles forward. The engines roared to life, propelling the massive jet down the runway. But something was wrong. As the plane accelerated, it became clear that it wasn't gaining speed quickly enough. The runway ahead was disappearing fast, and the jet was still firmly on the ground. The pilots, realizing something was amiss, pulled back on the controls, desperate to lift off. The Airbus barely left the ground, its wheels skimming the edge of the runway. But the ordeal was far from over. The plane was dangerously underpowered. Because of the incorrect weight input, the engines weren't producing the thrust needed to climb safely. As the jet struggled to gain altitude, it approached an obstacle that loomed large: a set of antenna towers near the end of the runway. Inside the cabin, passengers felt the plane lurch and shudder. Some clutched their armrests, while others exchanged nervous glances. The sound of objects rattling in the overhead bins added to the growing sense of unease. In the cockpit, the pilots were fighting to keep the plane airborne. They pushed the engines to their maximum, overriding the automated settings in a desperate attempt to climb higher. The plane narrowly avoided the antenna towers, clearing them by just a few feet. But the danger wasn't over. As the jet struggled to stabilize, another problem emerged. The plane's tail had struck the runway during takeoff, a phenomenon known as a tail strike. This can cause severe structural damage, compromising the aircraft's integrity and increasing the risk of a catastrophic failure. The pilots now faced a critical decision. They could either attempt to continue the flight to Dubai, risking further complications, or they could declare an emergency and return to Sydney. With the safety of everyone on board hanging in the balance, they chose the latter. The plane circled over the ocean, dumping fuel to reduce its weight for an emergency landing. Inside the cabin, the mood was tense. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, trying to reassure passengers while preparing them for the possibility of a rough landing. When the plane finally touched down in Sydney, the relief was palpable. The passengers erupted into applause, grateful to be back on solid ground. But as the emergency crews inspected the aircraft, the extent of the damage became clear. The tail strike had caused significant structural harm, and the plane's undercarriage showed signs of extreme stress. It was a miracle that the aircraft had held together long enough to land safely. In the aftermath of the incident, investigators discovered the two critical errors that nearly led to disaster. The first was the incorrect weight input, a seemingly small mistake with enormous consequences. The second was the failure to cross-check the data, a step that could have caught the error before takeoff. These findings led to widespread changes in how airlines handle pre-flight procedures. Additional safeguards were introduced, ensuring that such errors could no longer go unnoticed. Pilots were trained to double-check critical inputs, and automated systems were updated to flag discrepancies. For the passengers and crew of Emirates Flight EK-407, the experience was a harrowing reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. But it was also a testament to the skill and composure of the pilots, whose quick thinking prevented a tragedy. Today, the aviation industry continues to learn from incidents like these, striving to make air travel even safer. But for those who were on board that fateful flight, the memory of those heart-stopping moments will never fade. As the sun sets over Sydney's airport, planes continue to take off and land, their paths guided by countless safeguards and procedures. But every so often, the story of Emirates Flight EK-407 serves as a sobering reminder of the fine line between routine and disaster.